Great, thanks, Stefan. That was a perfect intro to the topic at hand today. Hi, my name is Brian Heron. I'm the Senior Product Manager at Payment Frauds at Radial. I have a great job. I essentially help retailers solve problems. And there's a ton of problems facing retailers today regarding online fraud. So great time for me, not really a great time for retailers. So let me start out by saying this. Times have changed. What does that mean? That's a kind of a blanket statement. We at Radial have been doing this for a very long time. Coming up on 18 years, we've been helping retailers sell their products online. Back in the old days, in the very beginning, it was pretty simple. We were just happy to get people to come buy our stuff. We were excited to have online shoppers. And then after a while, times changed again, and it got to the point where we got good at it, and that caught the attention of criminals that found an easy way to make a buck by stealing things online. So we thought, okay, we need to shift our focus a little bit and start looking at these fraudsters and trying to stop them. And we got pretty good at that. Retailers in general have gotten good at identifying fraud and blocking fraud. So we're now at a new crossing point. Times are changing again, and a lot hinges on what retailers do next at this crossing point. So like I said, we've been doing this for a long time. Our model has always been at Radial that we are the merchant of record, which means, you know, from day one we were processing the payment for all of our online retailers, and that also meant, along with that, came the responsibility of handling all the fraud. We were on the hook. We're always on the hook for fraud, and that's always been our model from day one. We always took on the liability for our retailers as the merchant of record, and that meant, as times changed, we had to get really good at blocking fraud. So that's number one. And number two, the way our model works is that we don't get paid until the order converts. So we don't charge any of our merchants a single dime unless the order gets converted into a sale and our merchant ships it. So as a result, we know what it's like to be a merchant, because we essentially are. We're the merchant of record. We've been doing this, like I said, for over 18 years. Today we process over $5 billion in payments and fraud each year across 100+ different brands and retailers. But you know, this is not here to be a hard sell on Radial. We'll talk a little bit more later in the presentation about how Radial works and how we might be able to help. And if you stick around, I promise we have a can't-miss special promotion just for attendees in the webinar today. It's something we had to fight pretty hard for to get to offer, and I think you'll like it. So stick around till the end. So enough about Radial. I'm going to set up the topic today by talking about some trends in the market. And this is one that I like a lot. This is a quote from the Mercator Advisory Group. It essentially says we're in a perfect storm. So number one, we're selling a lot more online as a whole. Retailers are experiencing rapid online sales growth, and also at the same time, we have this thing called EMV chip card. If you're not familiar with it, it's that little chip that you've seen in all the new credit cards you've been issued by your banks. You're probably all aware of it, and now you, instead of swiping your card, you stick it into the terminal. What that means is it's making it much harder for fraudsters to commit fraud in store. That also means now that they're shifting their focus online, and this is not just something we're making up. It happened overseas in the UK and in Australia when they switched to chip and pin. So it's kind of an interesting situation. We've got all this online sales, we've got chip and pin. What does that mean? Essentially it means fraud's growing, and it depends who you ask. It's all over the board. So for example, Forder is saying fraud attempts have increased by 137%. Experian says 20%. We actually looked at it ourselves and we said, what have we seen over the last 12 months? And we've seen attacks increase by 55%. So it varies on who you ask. Some people say it's EMV. Some people say we're just doing more business online. I believe it's a combination of both in this perfect storm. Okay. Bottom line is fraud attacks are increasing. Fraudsters are taking more notice to online business than ever. Big story number 3. This is an interesting stat that Amazon just released. I find this pretty incredible. The point here is that you as retailers are feeling the pressure more and more to sell online versus in store you're feeling the pressure more and more to convert sales. It's all about selling and converting those potential shoppers to real sales. And in the end, of all the people that come to your web store, although you spend a lot of time and money getting shoppers to come to your store to buy stuff, in the end, only 3% of them will ever actually try to buy something. They'll ever actually click that buy now button. And our job is to help you convert as many of those as possible to real sales, because it's not that easy. And how many of those actually do get converted? I'm going to throw up another number, because what does all this mean? First number here, 2.9% rejected. That means that retailers on average, of all those shoppers that click the button to buy something, on average, retailers are rejecting almost 3% of those right off the bat for fraud. That's a lot. They're turning 3% of orders away, 3% of orders that are trying to be fulfilled. 15% of shoppers with orders have experienced rejection due to false positive. That means they've placed an order. These are good shoppers, and they've been rejected by any retailer because the retailer thinks they're fraudulent. And that has a big impact. Downstream, we know that 66% of those shoppers that have been experiencing rejection have either completely stopped or limited their shopping at that merchant altogether. That's huge. And the industry as a whole is falsely declining. In 2016, over $8.6 billion of orders they turned away incorrectly because they thought it was fraud. That's $2 billion more than the actual fraud they're trying to prevent. That's crazy. So those are some statistics. How does that play into actual repeat customers? We took a look ourselves, and we said, okay, even our own orders that we falsely have rejected, we said, how much is that really actually costing us on a per customer basis? And we looked at really interesting detailed data, and we said those customers that we've rejected that were good customers would have placed an additional 6 orders on our stores going forward. Just on the merchants that we manage, it would have placed an additional 6 more orders across all those stores at an average of $220 each. Every customer we wrongly cancel cost our merchants over $1,300 annually. That's why we're so obsessed with this. We are so obsessed with making sure this doesn't happen because it's such a bad thing for our retailers and us. So how do those numbers apply to a typical business? We like to do that. You take that 2.9% and you apply it to, let's say, a business that takes in half a million orders a year at $80 an order. So it's about a $40 million a year business. That's a total loss of over $1 million. If you're going to reject 2.9% of those orders, you're throwing away over $1 million of sales and that was sitting on the table. And not only does that impact orders right now, but like I said earlier, it's a bigger impact downstream. How does that look tomorrow? We know that 33% of those rejected customers will only come back. Sorry, that means we know that only 33% of those customers will ever return. 66% will limit or never come back. And only half of those will ever place an order. So that's a big impact. What does all these numbers mean? These stories I'm throwing at you, the scare tactic and all that. What does that mean? This is how times are changing. Like I said, it used to be we're just happy to get an order back in the old days, and then it's okay, we better start stopping fraud. Well, the shift that's happening right now is this, and there's a couple key takeaways from today's webinar. If you remember anything, there's a few things I want you to remember, and this is one. It's not good enough to just stop fraud anymore, okay? And what does that do to the retailers who don't understand that? In the end, there's going to be winners and losers. If you don't understand this message and you don't do something about it, here's the good news. The good news, and this is kind of what Stefan was alluding to earlier in his intro. So there's our fact. 2.9% of orders are rejected because of fraud. Here's the silver lining and the happy part of all this. Nearly all of them are good orders. And we're going to pause there to let that sink in. This is true. Of that $1 million that sample retailer we just talked about rejected, most of that, almost all of it, is good orders, good customers that are trying to do business. And the good news is there's ways around that. So I'm going to lay this out in a perfect world. We believe at Radial, we know and we believe that everyone, every retailer deserves a few things. 100% approvals. You guys deserve to have every order approved 100% and have 0% of them being fraud. That's a perfect world. Your customers also deserve a frictionless experience. And in this world, retailers should see fraud as an afterthought. You shouldn't even have to be thinking or worrying about fraud. You should go back to focusing on what you do best, running your business, your customers, your products. So, is this a pipe dream? Is this a reality? How far off are we? And that's what I want to spend the rest of the webinar talking about, how to get to this perfect world. And really, you're a lot closer than you think. So first, even before we talk about that, what's out there for you as a retailer to help you reach these goals? Tools. There's a ton of them. There's a ton of, quote, fraud tools out there. I look at it like this. You've probably seen all these different terms thrown out there when you're trying to decide what kind of fraud management you should choose. And there's some awesome stuff. In fact, I'm not here to knock any of this. Just the opposite. We need this. I call it AI, artificial intelligence, machine learning, device fingerprinting. Because of this rush by the fraudsters to the online channel, because of this rush, the result has been a ton of money invested into this industry. And the end point has been the development of this phenomenal set of technology, machine learning, device fingerprinting, AI, all that sort of stuff. We need it. I'm not here to knock it at all. In fact, I couldn't imagine, we would not be able to process the amount of online business that we all process today without this technology. And all of them are kind of saying the same thing. They're promising the same thing. Instant decisions using machine learning, higher approvals, what does that mean? And of course, no more fraud. That's all awesome, and that's true. All of that is true, but some things to consider before going out and deploying the latest shiny tool. 3 things to consider, 3 points to think about as a retailer that's dealing with the pressures that I spoke about earlier in the presentation. Number 1, all joking aside, this is kind of a true thought. If you had the right tools, would you build your own house? I'm kind of a DIY person. I love doing things around the house. But if you gave me all the right tools and resources, there's no way I would ever actually build my own house. I wouldn't trust it. I wouldn't sleep under it. I wouldn't put my family under it, because that's just not what I do. I'm not an architect. I'm not a construction expert. I don't build houses for a living. So think about that in the sense of fraud. Somebody gives you a fraud tool. Are you the right person to use it to run your business? Probably not. Here's another thing when looking at some of these fraud tools that are out there. They're all touting some great things. There's a sample of it on the right of one of them saying, higher approval rates guaranteed and 100% chargeback guarantee. When you see that, the red flag has to go up in your head. Something has to give. If they're guaranteeing higher approval and 100% chargeback, they've got to give on one of those ends. They're going to definitely guarantee 100% chargeback. So what does that mean? Your approval rates are actually going to suffer by that, unless they're really, really good at it. And some of them are, some of them aren't. So number 1, ask them the right questions. What is the approval rate you're guaranteeing? What are your average approval rates for the clients you do today? And this is an interesting one, because they're not processing payments for you, if they're just doing the fraud side. Ask them what happens if your fraud rate exceeds thresholds. And what that means is, sure, they'll say your chargeback rate's 100%, meaning you're not going to have to pay a chargeback rate. But there still could be chargebacks that they're paying for. And not sure if you know this, but if your chargeback rate gets too high, regardless if you're paying the bill or the fraud provider is paying the bill, if it exceeds 1%, the credit card companies, Visa and MasterCard, are going to flag you as a high risk, and you will be paying a higher interchange as a result of it. This fraud tool has nothing to do with that. They're just paying the fraud chargeback, but you are left holding the bill for the payment processing interchange rate. So ask them that. There's just some questions. These are good. Just be very careful when evaluating some of these tools. And the third is this. This leads me into the other big message today. Don't lose sight of the human aspect. You know, all this cool technology is great. They're all touting that no humans have to intervene. It's all machine learning, AI. It's all awesome, but you can't forget about the human aspect. And I want to actually take some time to look at a parallel industry to make my point here. You know, as a product manager, like I said, I love trying to solve problems, and this is a problem I'm watching closely in the market, the problem of self-driving, the problem that self-driving cars are trying to solve. You know, traveling from point A to point B quickly, efficiently, and safely, all while being able to multitask. Wouldn't that be great? And that's the problem these car makers are trying to solve. Here's another one. This is kind of, we maybe don't need this, but it would be a nice to have. You know, in all seriousness, these pictures are showing the same thing. Using technology to solve human problems or needs. And actually there's 5 levels of automobile autonomy. Level 1, where we're at today, typically, you know, you have to drive the car 100%. And level 5 is you don't have to do a thing. You can go from point A to point B without having to lift a finger or touch anything in the car. We're right, believe it or not, we're at like level 3 right now in the industry. It's half automated. But the point is, and this is number 2 that I want you to leave here with today. All this technology in the auto industry is great, but we're not there yet where we can completely leave it up to the computers to do it for us to achieve our goal. And the same thing is true for us in the retail space and automated fraud. It's all awesome. It's all great, but we're not yet at the point where we can hand it over to the computers and technology just yet. Here's another image that I'll use as a parallel as I draw a comparison to the fraud industry. This one's a pet peeve for me. I get in the car all the time, and I can't just set the dials and drive. I try to do that. I wanted to do that. I turn the dials, start driving, and what winds up happening is I'm constantly fiddling with it. Buttons up and down, turning up the temperature, the different areas. The point is the computer that I have in the car is not yet there to, it's not yet at the point where I can just set it and forget it and walk away. And it's similar to a dial and an image we use a lot when explaining how online fraud works. You know, it's all about managing the dials. You turn the dial all the way one way and you block all the fraud, but you really impact your sales a lot because you're blocking a lot of good sales. So fine, turn it the other way. You let in all the sales, but you're also letting in a ton of fraud and becoming a target. So it's the same thing. It's managing this dial, but it's not yet to the point where the computer can manage it for you, where you're going to block all the good and let in all the bad. Not yet. Someday maybe, maybe not. And I'm going to pull back those industry numbers that I showed you earlier and use another illustration. So here's that industry average. And we'll call this the conversion funnel, meaning up the top is potential shoppers that have come to your store, they've gone through checkout, they've clicked on submit order, and hoping to get their order fulfilled. And on the bottom are the actual ones that you as a retailer are letting through, or your fraud provider. And on average, that 2.9% means that 97.1 get let through. Now, we realize that's an industry average. It's very broad. It counts retailers that aren't doing anything. They don't have anything at their disposal to manage fraud, which I'm sure is nobody, you know, on this call here today. So what's at your disposal? We just talked about. What can you do? You've got some great technology, which I call AI. So you apply that artificial intelligence to the funnel, to those orders coming through, and what does that result in? It's a great lift. I mean, look at that. By using some of this really cool technology, you can jump up to about 98.5% approval rate, which is a big 1.4% lift in sales. That's awesome. If you can do that, Kudos to you. You're selling more, your customers are happy, your business is healthier. Can it get any better? And this is the point I'm trying to make. What happens if you layer on top of that awesome technology a person? We believe it does get better. We take a look at it, take the technology, add in a human, and this is what we know it can get to. 99.7%. I'm not just pulling a number out of thin air. This is actually what we at Radial achieve. By using technology and humans at the same time, you can achieve a 99% approval rate on average. That's another 1.2% lift in sales. And here's the thing. Here's why we know this works. If you think about it, on the other side of that battlefield, when you're battling fraud, it's not just a computer you're battling against, right? No, there's a person on the other side. There's always a person that's matching wits with you. They're not just setting their technology, turning on their awesome fraud machine and walking away and going to the bar and have a few drinks. They're not. They're sitting there and they're constantly tweaking it. They're poking and prodding, and they're using something that we employ on the opposite end. There's something that technology can't yet replace today, as awesome it is. It can't replace human intuition and human reasoning. And that's the third piece I want you to walk away with today that I don't want you to forget. On the other side of that battlefield is a fraudster that also has human intuition and human reasoning. And until that goes away, which probably is going to be never, you can't remove the human aspect from the equation. If you leave the human in there, you're going to drive more sales. Yeah, sure, it costs a little bit more, but in the end you're going to sell more. And I'm going to tell you how to do it right and how to do it wrong, because that's really the key. If you don't do it right, you defeat the whole point of putting the humans in play here. So first, the wrong way. This is the number here. On average, retailers review a quarter of their orders with a person. That's way too high. That kills me every time I see that number. If it's that high, the expenses are going to be too much. You're going to kill your margins. It's not going to be worth it. Retailers say that on average about 50% of their fraud spend is on manual review. It shouldn't be. That's way too high. So number one, it can't be high. It's too costly. And also, besides the cost and killing your margin, it causes friction, customer friction. And I'll talk about that in a second when I talk about the right way to do it. So number one, the right way to do it, it has to be a very, very, very small number and sample of orders that go through that a human touches. We at Radial we only touch less than 2%. And think of it this way. If somebody were to come up to you and tell you there's gold out west, somewhere out west, hop in your wagon and drive out there, you might find some. If they do that, you're going to have a very low chance of finding gold. But what if somebody came up to you and said, there's gold out west, oh, and by the way, it's in this little stream right here, and, oh, and by the way, within the stream, it's in this 1 foot by 1 foot quadrant. Your chances of finding gold are a lot higher on a smaller area. And that's really what you're doing here when you're doing manual review. You're trying to find gold. You're mining gold for those good customers versus the bad. It has to be a low sample, okay? You also have to do it in a prioritized way. And that means, and this comes down to the customer friction. That means if you have an order that is overnight shipping, or even worse, you have an order that is in-store pickup. Customers ordered something very expensive. They're expecting to go pick it up in 3 hours in the store. You better hit that first because you don't want to cause any friction with the customer. Same with overnight orders. You do not want to hold up the overnight shipment because you're looking at it for fraud. Do those first. Leave the 2-day shipping orders later because the customer's experience is not going to be impacted. So do it in a prioritized way. And number 3, it should be done by fraud experts. And I know that sounds a little bit crazy, but it's true. A lot of retailers out there are using like customer service reps on the side to review frauds, or they're doing it themselves. There's a head of e-commerce that's reviewing orders on nights and weekends. Don't do that. Not only is it a waste of your time and money, you're going to be less efficient and you're going to be wrong a lot more than you'll be right. We use fraud experts here, and that means here at Radial, they come from the industry or they're trained in this, and I've actually sat with them. And even though they only spend a few minutes to look at an order, they usually know within a few seconds when they see the order details whether it's going to be fraud or not. But still, they go through the practices, they go through the steps to go through it, and usually they're right anyway in the end. So use fraud experts. And what does it look like when you do it right? Here's a flow chart of how we do it here at Radial, but this is pretty generic. So you take the order, and the first thing is you want to run it through your automated fraud system. Run it through your AI, your awesome killer technology. For us, that means on every order we look at over 175 data elements on the order. It's not just the customer information, the billing and ship to information, credit card, all the payment information. We even look at device information. You've heard of that device fingerprinting. You need to look at a bunch of different elements on the device. Run it through your rules. At Radial, we have over 1,000 rules dependent on the type of vertical that the client is in. We have a huge negative list of over 1 million records. We've been doing this for so long, for over 10 years, that we've been able to build up an awesome database over 1 billion customer records. So we look at a negative and a positive list. If you're on a negative list, you're not getting through. If you're on a positive list, meaning we've done business with you across our 100 different merchants over the last 10 years, if we know who you are, we're going to push you right through and we're not going to slow up the order. So we quickly make a decision in nanoseconds or milliseconds, and 98% of the time we'll approve it. And this kind of matches up to that machine learning number I showed you a few slides back. Instantly, you should be able to approve 98% of your orders just looking at the technology and the data on hand. And that's good. Like I said, a lot of clients, a lot of merchants are happy with 98.5. But in today's world, where you have all this pressure from Amazon and other companies to convert sales, that's not good enough. So we filter out about the other 1.5 we kick out to an analyst, and that's what you should be looking at. That's that small sample. And if you do it right, and you do it with professionals, and you use the right tools, in the end, you'll see what it results in is that 99.7 and 0.3 reject rate on average. This is how you should be doing it. This is what you should be aspiring to if you do it right. You know what? I'm going to call out a specific example one more time just to show on how the importance of the human intuition and reasoning comes into play. This is a real order we took. Went down to our fraud team. They have tons of examples of these any given day. Here's a real order that we ran through our system. It was a $9,000 order, so already a high-ticket item. The customer we had never seen before, never shopped with any of our clients, across 100 different clients in any of our history. They're not in our billion record database. So now we have a little bit of a red flag. Here's the real red flag. The billing address doesn't match shipping address. That's always a traditional fraud red flag. They've stolen credit card shipping to a different different address. Credit card was from out of the country, it was in the UK. Okay, another red flag. Shipping to the US in Indiana. Big time red flag. The browser information indicated the person was over in Europe shopping, in the UK specifically. Oh, and by the way, they wanted overnight shipping. Gee, that's also a red flag for fraud. We're really trying to get through our system here. And as a kicker, in the end, the AVS check. So the check from the bank failed on the address, meaning that the billing address they put in failed the bank's address check on the credit card. Okay, so I can guarantee 100% of the time, every machine learning, AI type of fraud management system is going to fail this and reject this 100% of the time. Ours did too. It kicked it out, but we had a person look at it. And this is where, the person is going to do things that a technology cannot do. We had our reviewer quickly found out, they did some quick searches, and they found, okay, this person owns 3 homes, 2 homes in the US and 1 in the UK. They looked up on LinkedIn. They found the person's name, found their profile on LinkedIn. Oh, this person works for a company that is headquartered in the United Kingdom, hence the credit card issuing from there and the house over there. And they graduated from Purdue University, hence the shipping address in Indiana. We didn't even contact the customer here. We quickly figured this out in a few minutes, figured out what was going on, approved the deal. And not only is it a nice $9,000 order for our clients, the retailer we're representing, but even more importantly, you saved what's going to turn out to be an awesome customer. If we rejected this high-paying, high-ticket, high-income customer, very likely may never have come back. You may have offended them so much. They may have, but probably wouldn't have. So that's really the big thing, is looking out long-term and seeing how it can help your business. True story, we've got a bunch more of these that I could spend all day sharing, but I won't. So going back to our perfect world, let's go back and kind of level set on where we are. Everyone deserves approve everything that's good, reject everything that's bad, completely frictionless experience for your shoppers, to the point that you as a retailer, fraud is an afterthought. And like I said in the beginning, how far are we off? How do we get there? As you've seen in the last 3 slides, when we showed you a couple metrics from Radial, we believe we're basically here, okay? For a couple reasons. One is, again, instead of more than just a tool, you should choose a partner, and at Radial, we're a partner. What does that mean? We know what it's like to be a retailer, because essentially we are the retailer as the merchant of record. We also believe partnership means you don't get paid unless the retailer gets paid. And that means, for example, if one of our retailers sends a customer and the bank declines the credit card authorization, we get charged for that, obviously, but we don't charge our partners for that. If the bank approves the authorization, but we look at it, and those very small percentage of orders that we believe are fraud, and we come back to our partner and we say, you know what, don't ship this, we think it's fraud, we also don't charge for that. That's crazy. We only charge when we tell you, the retailer, that it's good and safe to ship the product. That means that we have just as much stake in it as you do, and we put our stamp of approval on it. And by the way, if you ship that and it turns out to be fraudulent, we're not going to charge you. You're not going to feel any of the chargeback on that. That's all on us. And like we said earlier, human intuition, humans bring something machines can't. Human intuition and reasoning. And lastly, because it's 99.7% approved all the time on average. Okay, so how do those numbers match up to our perfect world? 99.7, okay. There's got to be some fraud in there, so maybe 100% is kind of still far off right now, or not far off. 99.7 is pretty close, because in our opinion there's still going to be some fraud. As always, as I said, it's 0% fraud always. Never worry about a chargeback, again with Radial. And frictionless, with a low 1.5% outsort rate that's prioritized by fulfillment method. It's as frictionless as you can get. And of course, yeah, fraud is an afterthought as a result, because we take on the burden as a full service offering, as the merchant of record. Fraud is an afterthought. Our retailers, our merchants will tell you firsthand that they can actually now go back to doing what they do and focus on running their business and selling good products and protecting their customers and promoting their brand. We think we're actually here now at this perfect world. But don't just take our word for it. I could sit here all day and tout Radial's products, but you should ask any of our retailers. And we have a bunch of them. I won't throw all them up here, but there's a couple I will show you. One we work with is a very well-known brand, Everlast. They came to us, and they were having real troubles. They're a high-profile name and product that has problems with fraud. They sign up with our payments, tax, and fraud product, and in the end, they realize an 8% lift in approval rate. That's an 8-point lift in sales just by signing up with us. Huge decrease in attack rate. Our motto here is not to eliminate the world of fraud. We can't do that, and frankly, that wouldn't be good for our business. Our motto is to send them somewhere else. Send them to somebody else's website, and that's exactly happened with Everlast. They went to another site. They saw a 62% decrease in attack rate and an 83% decrease in manual reviews. Oh, and of course, they have zero fraud now because we take on any fraud that ever comes up on their store. Shoe Carnival is another one, another great partner of ours. They saw a 40% decrease in manual reviews, and now they're experiencing a 99% order acceptance rate. And that's you think about that in the shoe industry, and shoe industry is a big target for fraudsters. The nice thing is now they have zero day-to-day fraud monitoring, whereas in the past they were dealing with it themselves on a day-to-day basis. Another discount apparel and home decor, we're not sharing their name, but the results we're sharing. Since they launched their online store in 2013, they've had a huge growth in sales, $26 million in overall sales, and we're able to realize for them an additional $666,000 uplift in sales annually, generated by a 99.84% approval rate. I mean, that's almost 100%. 0% chargebacks, hardly any manual reviews. So I could keep going on and on and on about some of these individual retailers. I keep touting our 99.7% approval rate. I'll show you, these are actual clients of ours right now. I took out their names and just used the industries because it's showing actual numbers. There's a couple billion-dollar clients at the top, some smaller ones down the bottom. Across the board, these are the actual approval rates that we're generating for them right now on an annual basis. And these are some pretty tough industries: toys, sporting goods, jewelry. There's a jewelry one with a high-ticket jewelry retailer and brand that we have is experiencing a 99.4% approval rate, which is really unheard of in the jewelry vertical, especially in high ticket. Pet supplies, another sporting goods, fashion, apparel. Some of these are really, really high targets. There's a cosmetics down there at the bottom, smaller ticket cosmetics client, 99.9% we approve, which is phenomenal. And just so happens, I looked at these numbers, I just pulled out some of these clients as samples. I happened to average them up, and they just happened to average out to 99.7. So the point is to show you that this is not just a average of our top clients. This is average across the board. Over 100 clients, $6 billion of volume that we process. On average, we approve 99.7%. And really, when you think about the end of the day, you look at all of our jobs here, the shiny tools aside and the nice features and bells and whistles, in the end, all of our jobs are focused around the same thing: selling more of our product, right? So that's why we focus so much on conversion. And look, we understand we're a premium service. We're not a driverless car. It just feels like it is the motto, but we're a premium service, and we know it's hard switching out providers. And we know a lot of times you like to focus on price, even though that really should look at ROI. We're the Mercedes-Benz that pays you back is the way we look at it. So we understand that, so we have a couple special offers for you. First, why don't you try it out for free? We have an offer out that for everyone, not just people on this webinar. Give us a try for free. No contract, no nothing, and it works really cool. How does it work? Send us a batch of your orders that you previously declined. Send us bad orders that you refused to ship because you believe they were fraud. We'll run them through our system, through our Fraud Zero service, and we'll come back and tell you which ones we would have approved. And of course, guaranteed chargeback liability. We've done this for a bunch of clients already, and I'll tell you, every time it's eye-opening. Some clients send us these bad orders. Some of them, we said we would have approved 40 or 60 or 70% of them if you would run them through us. So this is a great thing to try out. If you're not ready to just jump on board yet, send us a free batch of orders. We'll run them through for free. In a couple of days, get back to you, tell me what we would have thought, what we would have done with those, and how we would have dispositioned. Shows you how powerful our fraud product is. We're also offering, and this is just for attendees for our webinar today only. This is that offer that I had to fight tooth and nail for, and our leaders sign up for it just for the webinar. And it's basically this: switch to Radial's fraud management today, and we'll match what you're paying your fraud provider up to what they're approving for you today, and then pay us a premium on anything over top of that. So what does that mean? It's basically paying a premium for found money. So for example, let's say today you're using a fraud provider and you're paying them 25 bips on the order, and they're approving 98% of your orders. Cool. Switch to Radial. Pay us the same thing. Pay us 25 bips for 98% approval rate. Anything above that we find that we approve, pay us a small bump, a small premium, and we'll get you more approvals. And don't worry, it's not like you're going to lose money. That's not the idea. The premium rate we'll negotiate, and we'll ensure that you'll still come out way on top and way better than your existing state. So we're going to throw a quick poll up and also ask for questions. If you're interested on the poll, say yes. We'll have somebody contact you. In the meantime, while you're doing that, we're going to take some questions. I hope you found this to be informative and interesting, and not just a pitch on radio, but hopefully you can walk away and be a little bit smarter and more intelligent on using fraud tools to drive sales at home. So I see a couple questions coming in. We'll wait another minute or so, or another few seconds, and then I'll answer some of them. Just contact us. You'll have a follow-up recording of this webinar and also information on how to get in touch with us and the best way to get signed up for the trial. And that's actually one of the questions that has come in. The question is, how does this free trial work? Can you give a little bit more details on sending the orders over? Yeah, it's a good question. So the way it works is we provide you with a file format. It's a flat file. We'll tell you which fields to send us. The more data you can send us, the more successful it'll be. Even the sensitive data, because we have it set up securely. You take your flat file, you submit it via a secure FTP. It's real simple. We take that file, and in a few days we come back, and it's not just a number. We actually will do a presentation and show you data points that we found, data points that we identified, as positive and negative, and we'll say, out of all of these records, we would have approved these, we would have flagged these as questionable, and we would have declined these. And we'll work together. There's a contact person that will handhold you through the whole thing. So it's pretty cool. You can actually go to dev.radial.com and see a little bit more detail on it, and you can even click there and have somebody contact you. Or even just use the webinar email follow-up, and we'll have somebody contact you directly. Let's see, another question. Yeah, I kind of addressed this earlier, but it's a good thing to bring up. Is the 99.7% you're touting across all clients, across the entire year, not just during certain parts of the seasons? Yeah, and that's a good question to ask. Yeah, it is. It's a complete average of all of our clients, 100 of them, roughly $6 billion processed across the whole year, including peak season, where we all know that fraud spikes during the peak. So yeah, that's a true number. Thanks for giving me the chance to defend it there. Here's one. You talked about using experts. Can you give us a little bit more detail around the actual experts that should be used in-house? Yeah, so that's the whole point. Don't just use a computer here. You really need experts, and it's not just reviewing orders. While that's typically makes up the larger part of a fraud team internally, it's not just reviewing individual orders. We have a team here we call Overwatch that looks at bulk orders and aggregate orders, like the forest for the trees. So they are looking at trends across all of our volume, all of our 100 merchants, and catching fraud trends that way. And they do it all the time. They caught triangulation fraud that way and other interesting things. And it doesn't just stop there. It's not just catching the fraud, but it's feeding that information back into our, into our monster, our machine here. We're always updating our rules and our data sets to account for this fraud that we find intraday. We're doing it all day, 24/7. We're updating our rule system based on the things that we find and the fraud that we detect. And that goes even further. Another part of the resources that you need to have in-house, we have chargeback specialists. And what they do all day, every day, is they fight the chargebacks that we get from the banks. Because, you know, some retailers think you get a chargeback, that you got to pay it, and that's it. You're at the mercy of the banks, and that's exactly the opposite. We fight, we call it chargeback representment. 100% of the chargebacks we challenge, and we win a good deal of them. We win more than we lose. That's very important. You need to have people paying attention to that, because you can recover a lot of money and save a lot of money. And also, too, that feeds back into your intelligence. Every time we lose a chargeback, we want to know why. Why did we miss that one? We approved a deal, but we lost it for a chargeback. What did we miss? We feed that back into our thing, and that's the rest of our team. We have data scientists and rules specialists who manage our rules all day, that look at these things, and they put together these complex rule trees, and system analysts, of course. So it's a whole slew of people that you have to employ in-house, and again, use experts when you do it. Seeing if there's any other questions here. I think that's it. Well, great. And so again, we really appreciate you taking the time out of your day. We hope this was valuable and provided some new insight going forward. And of course, this will be recorded and sent out, and you can download and listen to it. And hopefully you'll think of Radial when you are thinking of trying to convert more sales and battle fraud. Thanks a lot, everybody.